Welcome to MacNeil Tech, the wash experience. My name is Scott Ferry and I work for Budco, a distributor of MacNeil wash systems. Today we're going to talk about general maintenance and inspections of the RG-440 conveyor. When working on any equipment, understand all the hazards associated with the task. Before starting any work, lock out and tag out the equipment. Take all necessary safety precautions, including personal protective gear, which includes, but is not limited to, safety glasses, gloves, and footwear. So this is the entrance section of the RG-440 conveyor, and this is viewed from the driver's side, and this is what you would see out in the field. So there's a number of visual inspections that we need to make on a regular basis. Now, first of all, there's the tension cylinders, and there's tension cylinders on the passenger side of the conveyor as well. The critical points to look at are, first of all, to make sure that the pins are in place that hold the cylinders in place. There's also an air hose that connects to these two ports on the tension cylinders, and that they need to be inspected to make sure there's not kinks, there's not wear, there's not any air leaks. Then the boot, this is the part that expands from the cylinder to tension the chain on the conveyor. And these boots can develop leaks over time just from wear, so you need to listen for leaks. The other visual inspection here is you need to make sure that the fall arm is in place and that it's tight, because this could loosen up, so you got to make sure that's nice and tight. And then make sure that the manual call-up is also functional and that it's nice and tight. Then we come down here and we have the slider assembly. Now the slider, this bushing that's pictured right here and right here will wear over time, and so you need to be able to inspect that, which may involve some cleaning of this area, but you want to make sure that an excessive gap doesn't develop underneath this bushing, because it'll wear on the top side, and so you'll start to develop a gap on the bottom side. So it's really important to visually inspect that so that can be repaired or replaced before it becomes an issue. Then there's the chain tension sensor, which is this right here. So as the chain wears over time, the slider assembly will move to the back of the conveyor. And so when this, there's a magnet right here on the back side, and when this magnet gets to the point that it's underneath this sensor, then it's time to take a link out of the chain. Then we've got our lubrication points right here. So these two zerks right here will put grease down to lubricate the slider assembly, and that should be done on a weekly basis. And then there's the grease zerk that does the take-up drum, and if possible that should be done daily. But that covers the visual inspections and lubrication points from this point of view. So this is the take-up drum. This is also another area of critical importance for visual inspection. So first of all, the take-up drum has a weld on either side of the drum, and the chain rides inside those two welds. So over time it is possible for that weld to wear, so it's really important to pay special attention to that so that if it does begin to wear on one side or the other, that you can replace the drum before it fails. Then there's the take-up drum bushings, and this is the wear point. This is what wears over time. That it's kind of the sacrificial piece to protect the drum and the shaft. So when you start to see this wear, a lot of times you'll see the actual rim of the bushing disappear, and at that point it's time to replace it. But this is really important, again, to pay attention to this section of the conveyor and inspect it on a monthly basis. So this is the call-up section, the call-up forks. This requires a regular visual inspection. First of all, when the forks rotate to the top deck of the conveyor, it's important to make sure that it's mating up well. When these forks start to wear out and the point starts to wear down, these could over-rotate and jam. So inspect that regularly, replace when necessary. Also, the top deck could start to wear a little point right here, a little divot from the forks impacting the conveyor deck. So you may need to build this back up with a little bit of a weld. Also make sure that the return spring is in place. And very importantly, make sure to lubricate the shaft of the call-up cylinder. This should be done at least weekly, preferably a little bit more often than that, and that can be done just by spraying the shaft with it in the extended position with some fluid film. So this is the exit side of the conveyor, the drive section of the conveyor. This is the same whether it be the XR1000 or the RG-440 conveyor. This is an electric drive system, so we need to inspect several things here on a regular basis. First of all, this is an electric motor in a wet environment, so we need to inspect to make sure that the electrical connections are tight, that there's no water, that we're not rusting out too badly here. We also need to inspect the gearbox and the HECO drive. The HECO drive has oil inside of it. With an electric drive, we need to check that on a monthly basis and make sure that our oil level is full. It's a fully synthetic oil that's added in there, and it could be changed out on a yearly basis. So then we also have the visual inspection on the safety door and the safety mat. Now this is the XR1000 right here. The RG-440 has a little bit different configuration here, but it's important to lubricate the bearings, to inspect the safety door, make sure there's not any cracks or broken welds, inspect the stops, make sure the stops haven't worn through, and that the system is intact. It's also really important to make sure that your exit safety plate, that's this on top of the conveyor, make sure that's in place and sound. It's also really important to inspect the exit side of the conveyor on the sprocket. Now, this is the same sprocket used for both the RG-440 and XR1000 conveyors. And this again is a wear point, so it needs to be inspected. So you want to make sure that the tooth right here doesn't wear down too far. And as it wears, it'll kind of create, this is an older sprocket right here, so you can see that the chain wears off this side of the tooth. And so it can actually be turned to extend the life on it, but it does, when it starts to flatten out like that on both sides, it's time to replace the sprocket. The other thing to inspect is the rotary encoder disc. On the back side of this, there are magnets that need to be cleaned off with a towel on a regular basis. And then also inspect your reed switch, which is what reads the magnets on the rotary encoder disc. Once the work is complete and the conditions deemed safe, the lockout tagout can be removed. Be diligent inspecting and maintaining the conveyor. It's the most important piece of equipment in the car wash. Thank you for joining us at MacNeil Tech, the Wash Experience.